Hello, welcome to Tales of a Time Lord. And in this video I'm going to be doing a quick breakdown of the unit dating controversy.
What, you used to work for them?
Yeah, a long time ago, back in the 70s. It wasn't the 80s, but it was all a bit more homespun back then.
Some of you might have heard of the unit dating controversy, and you might not understand what that means, and that's okay, because I didn't too for quite a while. It's basically that the stories happening in units that aired in the 1970s did not necessarily happen in the 1970s. If you're a sort of fan like me that doesn't care if a story happens in the Elizabethan era, the Victorian era, or the Edwardian era, you don't care if something happened in the 1970s or the 1670s, this isn't really going to matter to you. This is just a little qualm of fans who keep hold of details, and this particular detail, which is moderately important in the 1970s, doesn't make sense. And I'm just going to break down to you what that means so you can understand when people mention the unit dating controversy, you'll understand what it's talking about. So the first story to fully establish what unit is in 1970, called Spearhead from Space. This is the first story of the Third Doctor. But to understand the unit dating controversy, we have to go back slightly further. The problem begins in the story The Abominable Snowman. This is a Second Doctor story with Victoria Waterfield, Jamie McCrimmon, and the Second Doctor. It is set in 1935, although we didn't know that at the time. The Abominable Snowman has a sequel story called The Web of Fear. The Web of Fear involves one of the same characters from The Abominable Snowman and the same main villain, the Yetis. The Web of Fear dates the previous story, The Abominable Snowman, in 1935.
And you met him, when was it you said? In 1935? In Tibet, yes. You couldn't possibly have. You're no older than...
And it states that the story, present day, takes place 40 years after that, or at least 40 years after that.
But it can't be. Why, that's over 40 years ago.
Now, the story is in the 1960s, but it names itself, therefore, 1935 plus 40. It places itself in the 1970s, specifically around 1975. The story, The Web of Fear, introduces the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, or I believe he has a different title at this point, maybe Colonel Lethbridge Stewart. And so this dates the Second Doctor's first meeting with the Brigadier as being 1975. Flash forward to the following season in 1968, I believe, the same year but the following season, and we meet the Brigadier again, this time facing Cybermen in The Invasion. The Brigadier then states that the whole Yeti business, where he previously met the Doctor, happened 4 years previously to him.
Of course, the Yetis. We met you in
That's right, McCrimmon in the Underground. Must be 4 years ago now.
It felt long. It only seems like a couple of weeks ago, doesn't
I've
it?
told you over and over again, Jamie, time is relative.
So this is the same year, the following season, but he says the story is set 4 years later. So we've gone from 1975 to 1979. And this story taking place around 1969 means that it is set 10 years in the future to us, where the Electromatics Cybermen company is presumably set, 10 years in the future. We then meet the Brigadier and the Third Doctor and unit, etc., that is fully evolved into the Unified Intelligence Task Force, or the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, in 1970's Spearhead from Space, which is now officially set 10 years in the future in 1980. And this continues throughout the era. It's not so much brought up, but it is sort of inferred that it is continuing in this timeline. And we finally get confirmation of this in Pyramids of Mars, where Sarah Jane states that Sutekh can't have won in the 19-whatevers because she was picked up by the Doctor in the 1980s, and she goes to pains to state repeatedly that she was picked up in the 1980s.
Well, now we are here, why don't you tune up 1980 and we can, well, leave.
1980, Sarah, if you want to get off. That's the world as Sutekh would leave it. Desolate planet circling a dead sun.
That can't be. I'm from 1980.
Which means that this whole dating time jump is still confirmed. The show brought back Unit in The Android Invasion and The Seeds of Doom. Nicholas Courtney had requested not to be involved in these stories anymore and wished to be cut out due to retirement or death. And when he was asked back for these couple of stories, he politely declined and said that he had other commitments. So there is a new Brigadier, and for those two stories, the Brigadier does not appear in the stories, at least not in the case of Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. They finally got Nicholas Courtney to return in a story Mordrin Undead, in the Fifth Doctor's era in 1983. Now, these stories were originally written for previous companion Ian Chesterton to return, namely William Russell was not available to film, and they rewrote the part for the return of the Brigadier, who is now retired and is working at a school. Now these stories are set in 1983.
This is 1983?
Yes.
Then it should be here.
And they have two versions of the Brigadier. There is one in the present day who has retired, and one set in the past who has just left Unit. However, when the Doctor asks him when he left Unit, he states that he retired in 1976.
When did you leave Unit, Brigadier?
7 years ago. Of course, I could have retired on my army pension.
Which is roughly the date of these stories in season 13, when he would have left around the Seeds of Doom time, is around 1976. However, the writer had forgotten about the Unit dating controversy, and therefore set them when they aired rather than when they were set in the 1980s. Correctly, he would have said that he would quit Unit around 1986. However, this now means that that line in The Invasion, where he is building up Unit in 1969, which is set in 1979, he now states that he's retired before that point in 1976, and there goes the Unit dating controversy.
Malcolm, I need you to send me one of my father's incident files, codenamed Chroma, 70s or 80s, depending on the dating protocol.
So in essence, it's not dissimilar to if you've seen Aliens of London in Series 1 2005, where the Doctor skips a year and accidentally brings Rose back a year later. And so the stories in 2005 and 2006, 2007 is now 2008, etc. But every story in the 1970s now takes place in the 80s, at least the present day Earth stories that Unit are involved in. There have been several attempted explanations to discover why this happened and how to fix it. The writer of the stories basically says that they buggered up, they didn't understand the timeline properly and got it wrong. One could suggest that the stories are set either in the 70s or 80s, depending on some kind of flux form, and in modern day Who they have acknowledged that the Doctor doesn't know when they're set, so there's some sort of temporal thing going on. My personal headcanon is that he is potentially wrong in Mordred and he misremembered the dates, because that does involve a timey-wimey paradox thing that has messed with his memory, so I think he was just misremembering the stories. However, I also do think that it is neater if we assume that the events of Unit happened in the correct timeline, so it is possible that we could say that they got it wrong in the 70s due to some kind of timey Fisher thing, but because that has more references to being in the 80s, that means that you have to retcon more material if you say it's in the 70s, whereas if you say it's in the 80s, you only have to retcon Mordred. In essence, it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't really matter, but it means that when present-day stories reference the 3rd Doctor, 4th Doctor era, it's complicated whether they're going to say it's in the 70s or 80s, because it's a bit contradictory. So there is the Unit dating controversy. I hope that has made it a lot simpler. I highly doubt it. But yeah, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this little theory. How would you retcon it? And yeah, I will see you next time.